Hi, everybody. I have the most amazing book about one of our Supreme Court justices, Sonia Sotomayor. And she's amazing. And she used to be a little girl who was really poor in a really poor part of town in the South Bronx. And she made herself into one of the most powerful people in the United States of America. And this tells us all about how she did it, and it's awesome, and it's true to life, and some of it is just actual quotes from her. So this book is named, her name, Sonia Sotomayor, and it's written by Jonah Winter and illustrated by Adele Rodriguez. Okay, but here's the thing. This is going to have to be in two parts because I've tried so many times to put this on YouTube, and it was 17 minutes, and if it's over 15, anyway, it just never worked, and I worked so hard. It was like building a house, and it still didn't work. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the time. I'm going to cut it off at about half, so it'll be in two parts, part one and part two. This is part one. All right, here we go. One of the cool things about this book is look at what they did as the flyleaf and the end paper. This is the end paper, and this is the other end paper, and this is the spine. It's always fun to find out about books. And this meant a lot to her. These, she calls them moonflowers. We often call them morning glories, but they grew, if you can see really close, they grew on this chain link fence in her town. And that always kind of, that metaphor was always big for her in how she lived her life throughout her life, including now. So that was really a beautiful thing to use as the end paper and yeah, that's awesome. And so we start out with that exact thing, the moonflowers growing on the chain link fence. And here we go. You never know what can happen. Sometimes the most beautiful moonflower blossoms in an unexpected place on a chain link fence near broken glass next to an abandoned building, watered by someone whose name you might not even know, but it thrives. And that's the neighborhood she grew up in. There wasn't much, many plants and stuff. And here's a picture of her as a little tiny girl. So beautiful. And sometimes the most amazing person blossoms in such a place as well. So it was with a little girl named Sonia. Her blossoming began with her mother's love and hard work. And you can see her mother. Her mother's way down there playing with her brother, and Sonia was the older sister, and her mother loved them so much. In fact, it goes on to say, oh, how Sonia's mother loved her. She worked night and day and night as a switchboard operator just so she could pay for Sonia's and her brother's private schools. She had never made it past the 3rd grade when she was a girl, but she sure wanted her children to. They lived in a public housing project in a part of New York called South Bronx, a place where most people had precious little money. And Sonia's family was no different, with only their mother to support them. And here's a wonderful picture of them coming back from shopping. Here's Sonia and her mother. They're walking up the stoop. There's her brother. There's the groceries. You see, Sonia's father had died when she was 9 years old, leaving just an empty chair and much sadness. And here's the empty chair. And there's the dad, and you can't see a picture of sadness. That's something you feel inside of you. But you can't give in to sadness when your children need to eat. This is why Sonia's mother worked and worked and worked, and then came home and cooked pork chops. To Sonia, pork chops were heaven. Oh, how she loved her mother. And here's a picture of her mother giving her a taste of what she's cooking, and her little brother waiting to get a taste too. I bet that your favorite people give you a taste when they're cooking too. When Sonia's mother wasn't cooking or working, she was studying. She wanted to become a nurse so she could make better wages and help her children even more. While Sonia slept, sometimes her mother stayed up until midnight doing her homework. There was nothing she would not do to help Sonia or her brother. And here's a picture of her mom studying way into the night while Sonia slept. She worked so hard. She loved Sonia so much. She'd do anything for her kids. Sonia loved the world her mother gave her. Her mother and father were from Puerto Rico, and Sonia grew up surrounded by the tastes and sounds of Puerto Rican culture. A favorite meal was Spanish rice and beans, and she loved the big family parties where merengue music filled the air. Arriba, it says in the book. On Saturday nights, Sonia's family and friends would get together. While the grown-ups sat in one room playing dominoes, Sonia and her cousins played Loteria, a Latin American bingo game. Sonia's abuelita would shout out the numbers while the grandkids marked their cards with chickpeas. Sonia's family surrounded her like a warm blanket. Look at, here's different pictures of her enjoying their extended family and all the fun they had. And they were together as much as they could possibly be. They loved each other so much. And Sonia was surrounded by books. School books, library books, a set of encyclopedias her mother had saved all her pennies and nickels and dimes to buy. And when the schoolwork was done, there were her favorite books, the Nancy Drew mystery novels. Nancy Drew was a girl detective who was always on the go, solving crimes. She was unstoppable. That's who Sonia wanted to be. Here's a picture of Sonia reading books, all the books she could get her hands on. And here's Sonia acting out being a private detective like Nancy Drew. She had a big imagination, and that's really a good thing to have in life too, whether you're a kid or you're an adult. But then something happened that made her change her mind when she was only 8. Her doctor sat her down and told her some bad news. She had a disease called diabetes. If you have diabetes, you have to take several shots of medicine a day for the rest of your life. So maybe she wouldn't be Nancy Drew, but that didn't mean she couldn't be unstoppable. Her favorite TV show was Perry Mason, about a courtroom lawyer. One episode ended with the image of a judge, the most powerful person in the courtroom. A light bulb went off above Sonia's head, and she knew in that moment she would become a judge. Becoming a judge, though, that's not easy. Sonia knew she'd have to really get really good grades. And she did. She worked so hard. So while all the other kids may have been goofing off, Sonia was studying at her mother's kitchen table year after year after year after year. And here's a picture of her hearing the sad news about her diabetes condition. And here's her deciding she wants to be a judge, and she just kept reading and studying year after year after year after year. She was determined. It paid off. By the time she graduated high school, she had won an award for being the very best student in her whole school. What an honor. You can't imagine how proud her mother was of her. This was her daughter, her Sonia. What an honor. And here's a picture of Sonia getting her diploma, being the best student in school, and there's her mother holding her heart, so proud of her daughter. And she knew how hard she'd worked for it, too. Sonia's grades were so good that she was accepted at one of the very best colleges in America, Princeton University. This too was an honor. But Princeton was not the Bronx. Where were the subways? Where was the merengue music? Where were the people who looked like her? For the first time in her life, Sonia felt scared and shy and very out of place, almost like she was on a different planet. During her first week, she heard a cricket in her dorm room, and it scared her. What was this strange sound? As it turns out, it was a cricket, but it wasn't in her room, but on a tree outside her window. Growing up in the project, Sonia never had a tree outside her window. And there she is, looking outside her window. Oh, that cricket. Oh, I've never heard a cricket. She's never even heard a cricket. And growing up in the project, Sonia had never had the sorts of luxuries her classmates took for granted. Most of the Princeton kids had grown up taking tennis lessons and vacationing in Europe. They went skiing over Christmas break. Many of their parents and grandparents had already gone to Princeton too. They were used to it. Suddenly, Sonia was aware of being poor, of being Latina, of feeling inferior. Where was the warm, comfy blanket of her family? Oh, how she missed them. So let's stop right there. This will be the first half. And then make sure you click on the second half of the book, Sonia Sotomayor. And we'll pick up right where we stopped. See you on the next half. Thanks for being here.